in the past year. And there's licensing available to research and develop cannabis products. I've often said that cannabis is the most powerfully efficacious herbal medicine available on the planet. Around 30 years ago, they made the mistake, I don't know how long ago, when I did my doctorate degree. Incidentally, I have a PhD in human pathology. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't write scripts, I do research. And for 15 years now, I've been focusing my research on the cannabis plant. I've published a number of what are called case studies. I published a study we did on methadone addiction last year with a dispensary here in Vancouver. And I've always attempted to maintain a position on the high road within this crazy industry called the medical or the cannabis industry. I've often likened it to being inside of a shark cage. When I get my slide up, oh, there we go. What I wanted to talk about was the power of the cannabis plant. Like I just said, it's the most efficacious herbal medicine that we have available to us. But I often, of late, have talked of full utility of the cannabis plant. Then everything will change. If cannabis is legalized and fully utilized, you have an industrial revolution on your hands. There's an estimated 50,000 commercial products you can make from cannabis. You can make petroleum from it, you can make food from it, you can make clothing from it, you can make medicine from it. The next slide. I don't want to tell you how much my own money I've spent researching cannabis over the last 15 years. There have been no resources available, no grant money. I've kept the blinds half open, waiting for a yellow stripe on a pant leg to come by. There's always that fear of being busted. But like I say, I would work with the dispensaries and only with people licensed with MMAR licensing, as it was called, and people working with dispensaries. In the dispensary that I had my lab in, I witnessed roughly 4,000 people using cannabis therapeutically. And I got my own pictures here. Yeah, there are pictures that aren't showing up here on the screen. Yeah, that's good, that's chromatography. That is the bread and butter of what I do. It's called high-pressure liquid chromatography, or high-price liquid chromatography, depends if you're paying for the instrument. They run about $70,000 new today. They've come down quite a bit in the last few years. And you can lease them for about $1,500 a month. But what I was running roughly 1,000 cannabinoid, that's a cannabinoid profile there, roughly 1,000 a year, so I have roughly 15,000 in my data banks. And this is a BC bud profile. It's high THC, virtually no CBD. I call it psycho weed. I looked at that profile 14,990 times. And then, can I have another slide? Keep going. Oh, stop there. We'll get back to the chromatography in a minute. This is a list of cannabis efficacy. Efficacy meaning the desired effect. And you see it's a pretty long list. There's more than 25 illnesses there. Most of my experience has been around chronic pain. You heard John Burfello speak earlier this morning. I've been working with John for about 8 years. And when he came to me, he came to the club that I was in, and he was full of opiates and a living dead person. And now he only uses cannabis for his pain relief. And he's had 2 operations only using cannabis post-operatively for pain management. John is an incredible guy, and he's come a long way. Now this list of cannabis efficacy, I've often said, that's why it's illegal. Because that kind of profound range of effectiveness on so many different illnesses competes with the pharmaceutical industry in its anti-inflammatory market, its antidepressant market, its pain relief market. And this is a natural herb. It's a natural product, profoundly useful medicine. It's been illegal for about 90 years because it competes. People in the petroleum industry, people in the cotton industry, people in the food industry can come up with very similar lists of the usefulness of the cannabis plant, and they'll also say that's why it's been banned. I'm not a businessman, I'm a scientist, I'm a lab rat. I don't normally talk in front of a lot of people. Oh, I've been asked to. It's not my thing. But in my simple mind, if I was going to invest in cannabis as a medicine, you can pick any one of those illnesses, and you can create a product around treating those illnesses, and you'll have a major seller. The next slide. Yeah, there's a good graphic for those pain, but that is cannabis's greatest efficacy. Could you go to the next one, please? What do we got there? Keep going. Yeah. Now, this also had a picture of a little girl named Haley. Her name was spelled different than the comet, but the strain of cannabis that we named after Haley has an unusual profile. I don't want to flip around in the slides, but if you look at the first peak there, that's cannabidiol. In the one I showed you earlier, the BC bud profile, there's virtually no CBD present. This particular strain came to myself from Vancouver Island, and after looking at BC bud profiles thousands of times over, and this one came, the first peak to come out is the cannabidiol, and it started going up and up, and I got excited because I knew it was going to be a useful medicine, and the hippie kid that brought it to me started to cry, and I guess because I got excited about it, and he knew it would have good medicine, and it made him emotional. But within a day, I had this cannabis prepped into an oral capsule prep, and had mom of a 14-year-old girl give it to her, and she was experiencing 10 to 16 grand mal epileptic seizures a day, and she didn't have any for 2 weeks, silent. Took her to the Children's Hospital, and definitely a decrease in seizure activity, and they did EEGs on her, and the positron emission, I believe, was they were looking at with her brain, and a significant reduction in epileptic seizures in a 14-year-old girl that became the youngest at that time MMAR licensee in Canada. I have worked with her for 8 years as well. She wasn't expected to live past 15, and I escorted her, I chaperoned her to her high school graduation a couple of years ago. She's now 21. And that is the result of cannabidiol, that first peak there. I call this a 50-50 strain because it's equal CBD and THC. And then there's a third type of profile, which is what we call hemp, which is virtually all CBD and no THC. I say it is written that the genetics only goes 3 different ways. This is very, very important to understand in developing cannabis medicine. That you'll either get high THC, low CBD, like in BC bud, psychoweed, would not to be discounted. You can get 50-50 strains like Haley's Comet or Canatonic Tsunami, or you can get hemp strains, which are just high CBD, low THC. Now, I've never met a pot plant that wouldn't interbreed. They're all one species. There are different subspecies called Ruderales, Indica, and Sativa, but they all interbreed. They're all one species. So you can get crosses of the high CBD, low THC, with 50-50s, and with high THC, low CBD. I'm not very important to understand the genetics of the cannabis plant. I call it the 3-way split. I'm about to write a paper on it. How am I doing for time? Okay, next slide. Oh yeah, since day one, I came out of my doctorate training. I spent on a beach in India, southern India, and in the mountains in Mindoro in the Philippines, in the Canadian Arctic, about a year in each location on a 3-year doctorate. And in all cases, we were looking at people at high risk to oral cancer and supplementing them with things like beta-carotene and vitamin A, and photographing lesions inside of their mouths, which were precancerous, and attempting to make those precancerous lesions heal by giving them supplements, natural vitamins. And since that time, I became a believer in natural product medicine. And I've been hearing today about alternative medicine. I've often thought that our modern allopathic medicine is alternative because it's high risk, it's dangerous, it's experimental. And I've become to realize that many people are no longer believing in pharmaceutical medicine. I changed my thinking in India, where I saw a lot of people who were old, who weren't on heart meds or antidepressants. They were using what's called Ayurvedic medicine, which is natural product medicine, herbal medicine. And then I came back to Canada and I focused my thinking more on herbal natural product medicine. And then along came cannabis, which is the big daddy of them all. It's a powerfully efficacious herbal medicine. Why is it like that? Because it binds receptors in our central nervous system primarily, which is a balancing homeostatic effect to the CNS. Because of that receptor binding and the prolific nature of that receptor, that turns out to be the most abundant binding site in the human brain binds THC. This has only been discovered since the early 1990s. I remember the day they discovered the receptor. I was thinking, there's actually a receptor for that stuff. Wow. And as it turns out, it's a very, very common binding site in our central nervous system. When the receptor is bound, there's two types, CB1 and CB2. CB1 is in the brain and the central nervous system. CB2 is on immune cells like lymphocytes and granulocytes. Nevertheless, the prolific amount of the CB1 receptor, when it's bound, its general action is to tell that nerve cell, slow down, back off, don't get inflamed, let's not get confused, let's neuroprotect. So this general neuroprotective-like effect on the CNS is actually a balancing act of the central nervous system. Often chronic pot smokers are not fat or thin, they're kind of just right. Because although you get the munchies when you smoke pot, you're also getting stimulation of parts of the digestive tract and central nervous system. It'll speed you up a little bit and balance you out. I can go on long rants about the profound medical effects of cannabis. Like I say from that efficacy list, as an investor, pick yourself a niche and focus on that. I like to run what I call pilot clinical trials, where you get 20 or 30 people with the same illness, we give them the same cannabis preparation next to a placebo and note the effects. With 20 or 30 people, you can get statistically valid data that you can publish in peer-reviewed journals. This is what I do. I've been trained on humans, and thank God, cannabis has never killed anybody. I once read that Louis Pasteur killed off nieces and nephews doing experiments with bacteria. My whole family, including the dog, would be dead now. It is very, very safe herbal medicine. When regulatory bodies allow any drug, if you like, to go on the market, they check for two things. Is it safe and is it efficacious? Cannabis had a 10,000-year history as a cultivated plant, and no one's died. There are no recorded deaths of a cannabis overdose or a THC overdose. But it will scare the living bejesus out of you. Some people are laughing but not wanting to repeat that effect. I call BC bud psychoweed because it's just high THC. It can go to 25, even 30% THC sometimes. If you ingest that, particularly if you ingest it orally, you can overdose on THC and it can scare the living bejesus out of you. It's a panic attack. But remember that in 4 to 5 hours you'll be back to normal and probably asleep. But an overdose on THC can be an extremely frightening experience, and we want to avoid that. Within a day of realizing that THC decarboxylates, meaning it activates when heated, I was putting it into standardized oral capsules and quality controlling them the same as we do for any herbal product in Canada. So we check for heavy metals, pesticides, pathogenic bacteria, and we standardize the product by measuring how much THC is in it and whether it's activated or not. So, can I have another slide? That's typical BC bud. That's hemp, and that's not there, so I can't show you the overlays. Yeah, keep on. That's where the medicine is in the trichomes. I've got no video of this. Yeah, leave it there. For many years, when I would give lectures, I would end with the rubber bubble, because for the past 15 years since I've been working with medical cannabis, I push my arm out, it would slap back, push my leg out, it would snap back. That's because legality was on the other side. Now we can actually get licenses to do this research, and that is tremendously exciting to myself. We can actually do this legally now. This is a huge, huge, powerful plant. I have witnessed miracles with it as medicine. That's my field, human pathology. I've seen a little lady set aside a walker and do a dance. I have a photograph of a fellow who spent 13 years on the couch clicking his heels. It is profoundly useful. And like I say, full utility of the plant, everything will change. Petroleum will change, clothing, food. Let's utilize it, and don't be afraid of it. Like I say, the only thing you would fear is an overdose on THC, and we've now standardized cannabis into oral preparations, topicals, suppositories, e-cigarettes, many different administrative routes, and many, many uses. I think I'll end now. Thank you very much for listening.